So you may have already noticed that one of the limitations of functions in C++ is I can only return one value. I know in Python you can return multiple values, but in C++ you can only return one value. So one of the ways around this is instead of passing the parameters by what is called value, we're going to pass them by reference. This is what that would look like, passing by reference. So this is the function definition. I have two comma-separated variables, and there is an ampersand after the data type of each one of the two that I am passing by value. Passing by reference. So when I pass by value, I'm just sending a copy of the value to the parameter in the function. Any changes that are made to that parameter in the function will have to be passed back to the caller because those changes cease to exist once the function is left. Passing by reference, on the other hand, we are passing the memory location of that actual variable itself to the parameter, so any changes that are made to that parameter in the function permanently alter the value in that memory location. So it's the difference between marking up a copy of the Mona Lisa that you got in the museum gift shop or marking up the actual Mona Lisa. So when I pass by value, I'm just passing a copy of what is in those memory locations. When I pass by reference, I'm passing literally the address of those memory locations. So any changes that I make inside of the function permanently alter those memory locations. So here is an example declaration. So I have the void keyword. What does that tell me about this particular function? If you said it's not returning anything to me, you're absolutely right. I have a function called area perimeter with 4 comma-separated parameters, 2 of which are being passed by value, the length and the width, and another 2 of which are being passed by reference, area and perimeter, because of the ampersand that follows the data type of those 2 parameters. So this is what the function call itself would look like. Now notice in the function call I don't have ampersands. I'm just passing 4 arguments to the function itself. It is the function declaration that is determining that the second 2 are being passed by reference. So let's try this out. Let's do a couple of functions that we are passing values by reference. All right, so we're going to practice creating functions where we pass parameters by value and we pass parameters by reference, and we see the difference that it's going to make. So I've created a couple event variables, num1 and num2. I've initialized them to something. I've created a couple of char variables. I'm going to initiate char1 to a capital A, and I'm not going to initiate char2. I can tell that Visual Studio is warning me that that has not been initialized to anything. And then I just want to print it out. So let me show you what I would like my print statement to look like. So this is what I would like. I would like it to say main because I'm currently in the main function. And then I just want to mirror back all 4 of those values. And let's see what we get. I'm going to have to build this print statement with a whole bunch of couts. And I am going to use set with because I would like to separate them. See how there's a nice separation between the 4 of them. So I'm going to use set with, which means that I'm going to have to pound include iomanip. So let's give that a try. So I built my print statement here. I am going to put in the word main, a capital main. We're going to force a new line. And then I'm going to put num1, num2, char1, and char2. I am going to set the width of 10 between them to try to get that nice little spacing right there. And now it is throwing me an error when I try to run it because char2 has not been initialized to anything. So I'm going to just see if we can set it equal to a space. Now remember, you cannot initialize a char to null. It has to be initialized to something. So I'm going to initialize it to a space and now see if it will allow me to print it. There we go. So I have some space between each one of the individual variables. I'm going to force a couple of new lines so that my graceful close is a little bit farther down, but it is doing what I want it to do. Now this may seem a little bit tedious to have to use the less than. chevrons over and over and over again. And so for those of you who are familiar with the newer form of programming languages, you're probably familiar with a printf, right? Or a print format. And inside of here, in a print format, I can put some text values, and then inside of that, or following that text value, I can do a comma-separated list of replacement variables. So this is actually what I would like to create. Since I took all the time to create my pseudocode of what I would want it to look like, I'm going to copy that and I'm going to put it inside of this text field right here. Now I am going to back up this num, and it's all inside of the text field, correct? I did want to force a new line there, and I'm pretty sure that num1, that 10 is supposed to be a variable, right? And so I need to replace it with something, and then it looks like I have 5 spaces here. So I'm going to replace the 10 with, we use the percent sign, and then I'm trying to replace it with a decimal value, D for decimal, not floating point. That is a whole number decimal. So the D for decimal. And then outside of the comma separator, after the text field, after the comma separator, that should actually be num1, right? I'll put the rest of them because the next one is going to be num2, and then we'll put char1, and then we'll put char2. Those are ultimately the 4 that we are trying to replace. So let's see if that num2, this 15 is actually supposed to be %d because we're going to be replacing it with num2. That a is actually going to be a %c because it is a char. So I'll do a %c because it's a char. And then this one should also be a %c because there's nothing there. All right, now I would like to get some kind of spacing inside of here. And so I have the text field that's going to say main num1 10. So I want it to do the 10. And then before it does the num2, I would like to kind of force 10 places. So I'm going to use a switch inside of this D. And the switch that I'm going to use, I'm just going to put a 10 inside of there and see what this looks like. And then I'm going to remove these spaces, because we're going to try to force a width of 10 within that field. So then I'll put a 10 here. Actually, I'm going to put a -10 here because we'll see the difference between just a 10 and a -10. We'll see the difference in my char. We'll put a -10. We'll remove that. And then in my next char, we don't need any kind of field after that next char. So we're just going to leave it there. Let's see if we can find out the difference between the whole number 10 here and the -10 there. All right, so I'm going to have to force a new line after this statement. But can you tell the difference between the num1 and the num2? I can see that there is my 10 right there. So what I actually needed to do is, or excuse me, what it's doing is right aligning within the field 10 in width. I need it to left align within the field, which is what the minus sign do. It left aligned within there. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to change this one to, I'm going to put the switch minus in front of it, and it should then left align. And then I am going to, inside of my text field, we'll force a couple of new lines inside that text field, and we'll run it one more time. See if it's formatted a little bit better. There it is. So now I have some separation between them, and I have the values that are left aligned within a field that is 10 in width. I can see that my char2 has nothing in it. All right, so print F. Now some of you, depending upon what platform you're using, might have to pound include stdio.h in order to be able to get printf. So Visual Studio has included it for me. If your platform is not, you might actually have to pound include studio.h, stdio.h, my apologies, in order to be able to run that printf. Because this seems like a little bit more familiar output or formatting than we're used to, especially if I need a whole bunch of text and variables aligned. All right, so the whole point of this thing was to create a function. We're going to create a function. We're going to pass some parameters to it. Let's pass num1, num2, and char1, and let's manipulate them and see what happens. So I'm going to go down here below main. We're going to create a new function. All right, so here's my function definition or my signature. So I'm going to return a char value. I'm going to pass num1, num2, and char1 to it. I should probably be explicit. The name of the parameter does not have to be the same as the name of the arguments that I'm passing to it. So I could call it N1, N2, and CH1. I could even call it C1 to make it simpler to use. And so all I'm going to do inside of here is I'm going to manipulate, when I call it, I'm going to pass the three values, 10, 15, and A. I'm going to manipulate them, and then I'm going to return something and see what passing by value gets for us. So I came below main, I created a function, I called it pass by value. I passed the three parameters to it. I just manipulated the parameters, and then I'm going to just return char1. From here, I am definitely going to have to, this is my function definition. And then we'll go up there and we will do our function declaration. So let me copy this, paste it up here under the section for the function declarations, and then I am going to need to call the function. So I'm pretty sure I have it, most of it still on my clipboard. It is trying to return something to me, so I'm going to capture the return value in char2. And then obviously in the call, I just need the arguments themselves without data types. So we're going to do the call. And then once, oh look, I renamed the parameters. So this is going to be num1, that would be num2, and this would be char1. And then once we get it back, I'm just going to print them again. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to steal our printf statement. I'm going to paste it down here. And then instead of main, I'm going to say that this is return. And then we'll run it and see if there is a difference. So I can see that even though I manipulated num1, num2, and char1, I manipulated them, there is no change because the parameters were passed by value. So now I'm going to copy the whole entire function and then I'm going to change them to pass by reference. So I'm going to copy the function. I'm going to say pass by reference. And this time I'm going to pass all three of them by reference. So I'm going to put the ampersand in front of, or excuse me, after each one of the individual data types. And I'm not going to make any other changes to it. I'm going to have to take this new function signature or prototype. I'm going to copy it up here with our declarations. And then to call it by value, or to call it, I'm going to come back down here. There was the original call. So I'm just going to steal the original call and the original print statement. I will copy those and paste them down here. And this time we're going to say, I'm going to change the name of the function to pass by reference. That's the only change that I'm going to make. So now I'm going to call the second function pass by reference. I'm going to run it and see if it does make a difference now. So I can see that we did actually return char2 when we incremented char1 to a b, and then we returned it, and we captured that return value in char2. Even on the first run, it was showing a b. Now on the second run of the new function, now I'm showing the changes to all of the three original parameters as well, because now we're passing them by reference, which means that the originals are modified. When we're passing them by value, we're just passing copies, and those copies, the changes to the copies disappear as soon as we leave the function itself. So one thing that I would like to add is what is called the scope of a variable. I'm going to go inside, let's say the second one, pass by reference, and I'm going to create what is called a local variable. I'll call it local var. I'm going to actually set it equal to whatever we got from N1. And then before we do the return, because the return statement is automatically going to exit the function no matter where it finds the return, I am just going to see out our local variable. So I should be able to run the program, and this time when I run the second function, it should actually print out my local variable. So there it is. I can see that when we were doing the second pass by reference, it printed out my local variable. Now what I would like to do is to come out here in main and see if we can print the local variable. And it's going to tell me in main that it has no idea what the local variable is, that identifier is undefined because the scope of that variable is only within the function that it is created in. Normally we're creating variables within main, and so everything in main knows about it. This time we created this local variable inside of a different function, a function passed by reference, and so that variable only exists within that scope or within that function. You're probably familiar with a scope of variable that you create, say, inside of a for loop. For int count equals 0, count less than 3, that count variable is scope. It's only local to the for loop, and as soon as you leave the for loop, you no longer have access to that counter variable that you created inside of the for loop. So I just wanted to define the scope.